Mary had a little lamb.
False. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
The Russians claiming they're going to reduce military activity in two key areas around the capital of Kyiv and also northeast of that in Chernihiv. I want to read you a full statement from the deputy defense minister. And what's notable in this is that this statement was made after the current round of negotiations taking place between the Russians and Ukrainians in Istanbul. So listen to this. He said, quote, due to the fact that negotiations on the preparation of an agreement on the neutrality and non-nuclear status of Ukraine, as well as on the provision of nuclear guarantees to Ukraine, are moving into practice, taking into account the principles discussed during today's meetings by the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation in order to increase mutual trust and create necessary conditions for further negotiations and achieving the ultimate goal of agreeing on the signing of the above agreement, a decision was made to radically, at times, reduce military activity in the Kyiv and Chernihiv regions. Again, that statement from the Russian deputy defense minister.
Very wordy. Russians like a lot of words is what they like. Listen, so one thing that could actually spur peace talks is a very unsuccessful war effort. That's kind of what's going on here, okay? So Putin has gone from getting everything he could grab to trying to save anything he can hold on to. And they're in Turkey today. They're in Istanbul, which, have you ever been? Istanbul is one of the greatest cities in the world. It is unbelievable. It straddles two continents, Europe and Asia. It's the Bosporus River that divides Europe and Asia. I mean, it's just, it's a fabulous thing where, I know a lot of Americans don't have passports. And exciting for them is straddling the line between Texas and Louisiana. Oh, I'm in two states. Try two continents. It's dreamy. Anyway, that's where they are. They're in Istanbul with negotiators, and they were told, this is crazy. Don't touch anything. Don't shake hands. Don't touch the top of the table. Don't eat anything. Don't drink anything. Why? Because Putin, apparently, this has been reported in the Wall Street Journal, and some of you who follow, these spy stories know Bellingcat. You know what Bellingcat is, and you know who, the guy who organized Bellingcat is, right? And Bellingcat in the Wall Street Journal reported out yesterday that this Abramovich dude, who is a oligarch who's playing both sides of the aisle. Really, he's trying to hold on to his money so hard that he talked, Volodymyr Zelensky into not letting America sanction him. He's a Russian oligarch. Don't let America sanction me. I could be useful to you. I have connections. I can put all the right people in the same room at the same time, and you two can hash this out. I can make that happen. And Zelensky said to Biden, apparently through a back channel or some, I don't know, do they talk on the phone? Maybe it's Trump's old burner phone. We'll get there. But he said, listen, don't sanction Abramovich at this point. I think he can, help us put the right people in the right room for the right conversation. Now, Zelensky, all Zelensky wanted, and all he still wants, is to be in a room with Vladimir Putin. Because only Vlad knows what Vlad is doing. Only Vlad knows what Vlad wants. Only Vlad knows what his next Vlad moves are going to be. And Zelensky wants to be in a room with Vlad. He wants to talk to him and find out, what the hell are you doing? What do you want from us? What is it that you want from me? So Abramovich has been playing both sides and still holding on to his vast fortune. This is like a freaking movie at this point, except people are actually being slaughtered in real time as we speak. But they're in Istanbul, the next level below the presidents. The next level below are meeting in Istanbul, and Abramovich arranged for that to happen. Well, the Wall Street Journal reported yesterday, and Bellingcat seems to confirm, that Abramovich and 2 Ukrainian negotiators who were meeting in the lower level meetings had, like red, drippy, runny eyes, and their skin, oh God, this is so Putin. The skin started to peel off their hands and their faces. Now, you remember Viktor Yanushchenko, okay? He was running for president of Ukraine way before Zelensky, okay? And in the middle of the election, his whole face was like peeling and it was, bubbling. I don't know how else to put it. And they said he had been hit with some chemical weapon. He had been hit with something really painful. And the crazy part about Yanushchenko is that he actually got off the campaign trail for like 5 minutes. He was in extreme pain, and he went back on the campaign trail. He went back on the Now, he didn't win, but he did go back on the campaign trail. Well, anyway, they're saying that Abramovich and the 2 Ukrainian negotiators in the level below this level were poisoned with some sort of chemical weapon. So the big, warning went out today to the negotiators who are at the level just below the 2 presidents and said, listen, when you go in there with Erdogan, you'll notice Erdogan's not going to shake your hand. Don't shake anybody's hand. Don't eat anything. Don't drink anything. Abramovich and the Ukrainian negotiators said the only thing that they ate ahead of those meetings was chocolate and water. Interesting choice. Just say, but that's what they said. And today Barry McCaffrey is like, this is bizarro world. Okay, this is really crazy. Don't believe a word Putin says. Now, nobody believes a word Putin says. I've told you this, that Russians, plural, are world heavyweight champion liars. They are, because they have to be, because society is so prohibitive. You can't disagree with the president. You can't talk politics. You can't be LGBT. You can't be even sympathetic to LGBT. You can't be any other religion except Russian Orthodox. Do you know what I'm saying? And so they've learned how to hide themselves. They've learned how to lie. But anyway, so Barry McCaffrey was given a report today, and he was going, this is so bizarre.
We ought to look at his own personal history. The Russian armed forces went in to take back Chechnya. They were repulsed. Putin doubled down. He took 2 years. He destroyed the city of Grozny, where almost no one remained alive. No brick stood on another brick. When the Russian armed forces went into Georgia, they completely lost control of their military. This tiny country fought them to a standstill, and he redoubled on his efforts. So we should remain, I'm sure the Ukrainian leadership understands this better than any of us, extremely leery. We're dealing with a guy, Richard Engel just reported, and on the ground in Turkey, where the Ukrainian negotiators have to worry about being poisoned by a handshake or by touching the surface of the desk. So Putin murders people internally and globally. We shouldn't trust the thing he does. This is a time for the community of NATO to redouble efforts to support the Ukrainian armed forces. Putin cannot come out of this saying, I won. It's important not just for Ukraine, but places like Taiwan and other to not reward naked criminal aggression.
I mean, the guy is a murdering son of a bitch. He is a killer, okay? And when, Trump was asked about Putin being a killer, a murderer, a poisoner, a guy who uses chemical weapons on women, on children, on his friends, on his enemies, on, people that would negotiate a peace deal, whatever, right? He said, well, what, you think America's so innocent? We're killers too. But they are having, the peace talks are over for the day because it's much later there. I think it's 6 hours into the future, right? So it's like 9 o'clock at night. But Erdogan in Turkey is hosting Zelensky and Putin, which sounds like a recital program, It's like, and they will be performing Stravinsky's Petrushka.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The Russians raising this possibility, and they use some flowery language, of a Putin-Zelensky meeting. What do you see there, Christian?
Yep. Well, look, again, if that was to be the case, it is another major concession to President Zelensky, who has asked from the very beginning, even before the invasion, to have face-to-face talks with President Putin. Up until just yesterday or the day before, the Kremlin was saying there is not enough progress in these talks, i.e. maybe not enough progress for them on the ground, to have that kind of meeting. If they are, in fact, floating that now, that is something that President Zelensky had asked for. He kept saying, he said it to me just before the invasion when we were in Munich. He said, I don't know what Putin wants. That's why I want to have a face-to-face meeting. Putin poo-pooed that. He wanted to talk to other world leaders. He would love to talk to the United States. But he poo-pooed that. And now if it's true that they're raising that, that again is another important move. The real bottom line is how to get Putin off this ledge, how to get him out of the corner that he's painted himself into.
Right. And so this is what Zelensky wants. He wants a couple of things. And the first thing he wants is to sit down with Putin. And if Putin sits down with Zelensky, Putin has to know that the entire world is going to see that as Putin being a loser, which is why he doesn't want to sit down with Zelensky. But this war effort was so piss poor. It's so bad that Putin might end up giving Crimea back. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, that's how lame the Russian military is. And why? Because the Russians don't want to fight the Ukrainians. There is no will to fight the Ukrainians. The morale is low. Supplies are low. They've been low since the beginning, as we all knew. There was no food. The rations were from 2015. They were running out of fuel. There are radio calls between Russians saying, I'm running out of fuel. I'm running out of fuel. Somebody get us fuel. And we're stopped. Do you know what I'm saying? So, and the Ukrainians were fierce. They were like, this is our land. Get off our land. Then they heard that the Russians were raping their women, and they are. They're raping their women, and they were like, okay, because think about who is left behind. Think about who is left behind in these cities that Russians are blowing up, that they are razing to the ground, that they are making look like no brick on brick, no life, in the place at all, right? It's the elderly, it's the senior ladies who could not get out because the senior guys, they're fighting. They are. I told you, there's 68-year-old guys that are out there fighting. The women and the children, they moved either internally inside Ukraine. 10 million people are displaced inside Ukraine. And we know about a tenth of the population, about 4 million people fled Ukraine. They left. The women and the children. So who's left? Elderly women. Elderly. And that's who the Russians are literally sexually assaulting. It is disgusting what's going on there. And so what Zelensky wants are two things. He wants a ceasefire. He wants all the fighting to stop. All of it. And then he will negotiate something like neutrality. So what is neutrality? Neutrality means that he won't have any foreign boots on the ground. He won't have any foreign fighters. He won't have any foreign bases in the country of Ukraine. That's what neutrality means. And Zelensky said, hey, listen, I just let Vlad know that neutrality is on the table. We could talk about that. We won't host any foreign governments. We won't have any foreign bases, meaning us, the United States or France or Turkey or Polish or anybody in the area. They will not be allowed to base inside Ukraine. That's something that you can tell. So when Zelensky gave a note to Abramovich to take to Putin, to say that to Putin, Putin literally told Abramovich, I will thrash him. I will thrash him. That was his reaction to it, because Putin knows that the second he says anything about Zelensky's ideas being good ones, or gets in a room with Zelensky, everybody's going to say, hey, this idea that you won by a landslide, this idea that you won anything is, it's over. It's over. And in fact, it's time for you to give Moscow to Ukraine. That's how bad this was. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know if they'll ever have this meeting, but Zelensky is like, look, we want a ceasefire. I don't want to hear that you're, leaving, you're taking a few tanks out of Kiev. I don't want to hear that you're, not going to, launch any attacks against Chernihiv, which is 95 miles north of Kiev. Remember Brovary, that town of Brovary, that's where the raping is going on, just so you know. Yeah, Madame Brovary. No. Kidding. It's Brovary, but that is where there are old ladies that are being, and there are some young mothers. One of the stories I heard, I didn't hear it, I read it in a newspaper. I guess it was one of the Kiev newspapers, they have independent media there, said that the Russians were, raping women. And one of the stories that was told to a human rights person was it was a young mother who was raped in front of her children. Well, I got news for you. Ukrainians aren't going to take that crap. They're just not. By the way, that Will Smith, Chris Rock thing was real too. And so I'm thinking, now that Putin and Zelensky may be headed for peace talks, maybe Will Smith and Chris Rock can think about formal negotiations between the two of them too. It was real. And you know this because Will Smith has apologized to Chris Rock. Now, I'm telling you, this whole violent thing, settling your problems with violence, really, really bad, really bizarre. So this is where we are. No one believes a word Putin says. Nobody at all. In fact, there's a press conference going on right now at the Pentagon. And John Kirby said, we're not being fooled by this.
We've seen that Russia has attempted now for going on a month to sell this war of theirs to its domestic audience as a, quote, liberation of the Donbass. However, the intensified rhetoric over the last year and in the lead-up to Russia's invasion demonstrated that the Kremlin's real intent was to overthrow the democratically elected government and to occupy or annex large portions of Ukraine. The rapid advance to Kyiv in the initial days of the war showed very clearly for all of us that Kyiv and the capital city was a key objective for the Russians. So we ought not be fooling, and nobody should be fooling ourselves, by the Kremlin's now recent claim that it will suddenly just reduce military attacks near Kyiv, or any reports that it's going to withdraw all its forces. Has there been some movement by some Russian units away from Kyiv in the last day or so? Yeah, we think so. Small numbers. But we believe that this is a repositioning, not a real withdrawal, and that we all should be prepared to watch for a major offensive against other areas of Ukraine. Oh. It does not mean that the threat to Kyiv is over. Russia has failed in its objective of capturing Kyiv. It's failed in its objective of subjugating Ukraine. But they can still inflict massive brutality on the country, including on Kyiv.
Nobody is buying this. Everybody, who is watching this does see a few tanks leaving the area, going to Belarus, by the way. Yeah. But nobody thinks this is over.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
I want to discuss Ukraine, if we can, because there's a combination of events today. Our new reporting about evidence of Russian pullback. You have even the Russians saying that they've completed what they wanted to do in the north. We know that there might be some CYA involved there. When you look at those developments, as well as developments in negotiations in Istanbul, do you see a turning point in this war?
I see the start of something, but the start of some sort of an agreement really begins with the heroic efforts of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian military in pushing the Russians out of Kyiv and really pushing them away from all of the goals that they attempted to achieve and could not. So I do think that Ukraine is in a good negotiating position, much better than they would be had they not been able to push the Russians out of Kyiv.
Yeah, seriously, this is what the Ukrainians have been fighting for, just to get a better negotiating position. with Vladimir Putin because, listen, this guy is a dictator. The guy is like, this is the thing with all autocrats. There are a lot of talk, a lot of bloviating, a lot of noise, a lot of fury, a lot of sound, and very little to show for it except, dead people. Very little to show for it except things that are, torn apart and trashed, that are bombed or, that are, just lying in the middle of the road, unable to function. This is all Putin has managed to accomplish during these last, 34 days. Just killing things, maiming things, mangling things, knocking buildings down, knocking hospitals down, knocking schools down. I mean, this whole thing started with an attack on a kindergarten. Did anybody think that this was, not by design? Of course, he was just trying to scare people, intimidate people, freak people out. And obviously, the man is losing. He is losing really badly. He's losing badly because he lives in a bubble with nothing but yes men around him, as all autocrats do. They only listen to people who tell them that they're right, they're beautiful, they're stunning, they look good without a shirt, that all 5'6" of him is stunningly, masculine. It's very sick and it's very sad. And this is what we had for a president too. We had an autocrat. I alone can fix it. We had a guy that was all full of sound and fury and nothing to show for it. I mean, literally nothing to show for it, but a bunch of dead Americans because he decided that a pandemic was an inconvenience. He decided that a pandemic could damage the numbers. And so he said it was a hoax. And he just told everybody, go about your business. It's a hoax. It's not real. And that's what he did. So here you can see what an unleashed autocrat produces for people. Death, destruction, humiliation in the end. I mean, even Stalin looked embarrassed at some points, right? But, it looks like, the Russian negotiators, the Ukrainian negotiators are literally being poisoned. Literally being poisoned. I mean, Ukraine told its negotiators, don't eat, don't drink, don't touch anything during the talks due to concerns about Russian attempts at poisoning. Poisoning. Is this the 21st century or is this some medieval fairy tale? Is this Sleeping Beauty? Is this Snow White with the evil queen? I mean, Cinderella just had a dysfunctional family. But, Snow White and, they were poisoned. A wicked witch and an evil queen. I mean, honestly, so which one is Putin? I say he's an evil queen. I really do. I think he's an evil queen. I really do. Don't touch that apple. Don't touch that borscht. Don't touch that desk. Don't eat the baklava, even though it's delicious. Don't eat the pistachios. You're in Turkey. It's everywhere. No. But nobody believes a word they're saying. And, this is Senator Tammy Duckworth commenting on, nobody believes a word this man says, okay? We just don't. But the Ukrainians, with their fierce fighting, have put themselves in a much, much better negotiating position to negotiate him the hell out of their lives. She was also asked if Biden had done this right. And I think he did. And she does too. And this is a woman who was serving in uniform until she was brutally wounded and came home. And now she serves in the Senate. But they asked her whether or not Biden was doing this right.
Is it possible that the U.S. and NATO got the balance right here of arming Ukraine while avoiding a shooting war with Russia?
Well, I think that it was important to avoid a shooting war with Russia where it's U.S. forces on Russian forces. That could have led to significant escalation. I think that what we did right, what the Biden administration did right, was to inform NATO allies, to pool our NATO allies together, to inform the world what Russia was planning to do even before they did it, and to get all of the resources into Ukraine that Ukrainians needed. And it's not over yet. The Russians are still firing and killing innocent civilians. They're still bombarding without any discretion. And so we need to continue the fight. We continue to push to send as much resources to the Ukrainians as possible.
It just blows your mind when you hear the question phrased that way. Is it possible that Biden got it right? Is it possible? Are you freaking kidding me? Of course, not only is it possible, but this is why you want somebody with experience in the world, somebody with experience with failed wars, somebody who understands, what Russia is, who Putin is, that he's a poisoner, that he's evil, that he could use chemical weapons, that he could use, gas, that he has used gas. That's why you want somebody who is intelligent and isn't all full of bluster and fury and sound, but actually understands the situation, the stratego board, okay? He gets the game. He understands what's being done here. And he knew not to put U.S. troops in there. He knew not to fly. He knew not to, create a no-fly zone, because that would make us have to enforce it and shoot down a Russian pilot, which would have given Vlad every single ability to sell this to the Russian people, who, by the way, are not buying this. Russian mothers, they're saying now, and nobody knows, and we won't know until all this is wrapped up and done, and all that's left is to count the people Putin killed and to count the people that Ukrainian forces repelled and killed. And right now they're saying that Russians have lost about 16,000 soldiers. That is more than the United States lost in the whole entire Afghan operation and the entire Iraq operation combined. And this is 34 days in. 34 days in. 16,000. He is losing. He's losing badly. And Zelensky and Biden and NATO, they are playing this really smart and really well. And thank God the Ukrainian people are as fierce as they are and are as committed to democracy as they are and their independence as they are. And we're willing to fight for this. It's amazing.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
So what we will see in the next few weeks is probably this concentration of troops towards Donbass to carry out a form of pincer movement, or to try to join little pockets of advance from the northwest, south from Kharkiv, basically, down to this newly sort of formed land bridge between occupied Crimea and occupied Donbass. As Russia concentrates its force towards Donbass to try to hold more territory inside of the administrative oblast of Donbass in Ukraine, this would create a new geography, a new military geography, where Russia would freeze their positions. What we see now is the probable recognition by the military leadership in the Kremlin, and maybe even by Putin himself, that the operation is definitely not going according to plan.
Yeah, he lost, and he's losing really badly. And so everybody is worried about how brutal will he get? Will he use chemical weapons? Will he use gas? How is he going to hold on to Mariupol, which he has reduced to ashes? I mean, that place, this is why, when I first saw what he was doing over there, it invoked Chechnya for me. And I know a lot of Americans didn't pay attention to Chechnya because Chechnya is part of Russia, and Russia was attacking itself. And that's called civil war. And a lot of people confuse civil wars with invasions, and they are two completely different things. What's going on in Ukraine is the invasion of a sovereign nation. What went on in Chechnya was Russia attacking itself. That happens a lot in this world. There are tons of civil wars that are raging right freaking now all over this planet. And, you cannot look at them as something that outsiders can solve for you, because they can't. They can't. But an invasion of a sovereign nation, when the nation rises up and tries to expel you, tries to expunge you, tries to annihilate you, is a whole different ball game. And we've decided that we were going to take the side of the democratic, independent, free nation over the autocratic, closed, media, limited, propagandized nation that is brutal. That is absolutely practicing brutality. Now, I will tell you that countries around the world have expelled Russian diplomats, and we put that in parentheses. We put that in, quotation marks, rather, because they're not really diplomats. They're spies. They're intelligence operatives. So Belgium expelled 21 Russian diplomats that were based in Brussels or in Antwerp in Belgium. The Netherlands expelled 17 Russian diplomats who they say were using diplomatic cover to do intelligence work. Ireland asked 4 Russian diplomats to get the hell out of their country. Poland expelled 45 of them. Poland just expelled 45 diplomats, saying that they were consistently and determined to spy. They were, and so they broke up all the agents of the Russian Secret Service that were operating in Poland, which is good because Poland, while they've had free and fair elections since 1989, which doesn't sound like a long time because it's not, Poland was backsliding into autocracy too. Poland was starting to look like the United States was starting to look, right? I mean, it was becoming very white supreme. It was becoming very racist. It was becoming it was sliding towards some sort of a regression into something that didn't really look, smell, sound, or feel like democracy. They were going there. And I think this was a wake-up call for them too. So in that way, Vlad did a lot of services to free countries, to people who want democracy, for people who want to have free and fair elections, for people who don't believe that the Russian way is a good way or a sustainable way or the way that they want to live. And so in this weird way, and you have 24 countries that just expelled more than 150 Russian diplomats. Okay. And in response to some of this, you see Vladimir Putin trying to poison people. This is what he does. And that's why everybody is just, a little bit on tenterhooks, as they say, because nobody knows what he's going to do with the fact that he's losing, and he's losing badly, to a country that he wasn't supposed to see any sort of, pushback from, right? His yes men told him he would be greeted as a liberator. His yes men told him that the Ukrainians really wanted to be Russian, and it was bullcrap. And now he thinks, we're looking at his military. He still fights tank wars. He still fights with the tank, with the howitzer. Okay, this is crazy. But we see that he doesn't have an air game except to, bomb things. That's it. That's all he's got. And that this very little Ukrainian Air Force with these older MiGs are able to, take his Air Force out, and you know why? Because we trained them. We trained the Ukrainian military. We trained the Ukrainian Air Force. We showed them how it's not a numbers game. It's a skill game. It's a precision game. It's a strategic game, a tactical game. And you could win this game. And so we've been supporting, a democracy. We've been supporting an independent free nation for a while now and trying to help them defend themselves against what everybody knew was going to happen because Vladimir Putin doesn't think Ukraine is a place. He doesn't think it has a right to exist. He doesn't. He doesn't believe in a free press. He doesn't believe in free elections. He doesn't believe that the people are trustworthy. He doesn't believe in self-governance. He believes in an autocratic regime is what he thinks is best for everyone. And Ukraine was having none of it. And, this is a great learning moment for the United States. Why? Because we had an insurrection here, a violent one, where people were literally beating guys in uniform. It's not that far a leap Okay, the reason why none of these medieval fairy tales have a Putin-like villain is because if we had like a fairy tale in America with a Putin-like villain and not an evil queen or not a wicked witch instead, and we had a Putin-like villain, he would look like Donald Trump and people would go to his rallies. That's how far down the road America has gone away from democratic principles. So last night, the January 6th committee had a hearing, and the hearing was about whether or not to hold in contempt Dan Scavino and whether or not to hold in contempt Peter Navarro, who confessed to plotting a coup in this country, a violent coup, who actually had two things going on at the same time. The non-bloody coup, which failed, and then pulling the trigger on the bloody coup at the end when all else failed, which is where we are with Vladimir Putin. We're waiting to see what the last effort is going to look like, what the last violent attack is going to look like. Well, America went down that bad road too. And last night, Liz Cheney, believe it or not, said, listen, this is the thing. The Ukrainians fought for their democracy. Will Americans fight for theirs?
As we meet here tonight, Vladimir Putin continues his brutality against Ukraine, killing innocents, reminding us what happens when authoritarians rule. And each day we see footage of the unyielding courage of the Ukrainian people who are fighting and dying to defend their freedom. Their bravery reminds us that democracy is fragile. Democracy only survives if citizens are willing to defend it. We live in the greatest constitutional republic in history. No citizen in our republic can be a bystander. If we don't stand for our freedom and our republic, we will lose them. In his ruling today, Judge Carter put it this way: if President Trump's plan had worked, it would have permanently ended the peaceful transition of power, undermining American democracy and the Constitution. If the country does not commit to investigating and pursuing accountability for those responsible, the court fears January 6th will repeat itself.
It's so amazing to listen to conservative Republican Liz Cheney, who never saw a war she didn't love, say that America is behaving in a worse way than Ukraine is behaving, and Ukraine has been invaded, but they were willing to stand up and defend their independence. They were willing to stand up and defend their democracy. They were willing to do that. And yet, yesterday, a court in California, by the way, a district court, a judge named David Carter found that President Trump did attempt a coup in this country by obstructing an official proceeding, by launching a pressure campaign to convince Vice President Pence to disrupt the joint session of Congress on January 6th. He said that the president is guilty. It's more likely that he committed crimes than he didn't.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
As chaos engulfed the Capitol building on January 6th, President Trump spoke repeatedly on the phone with allies and supporters, some of whom urged him to put an end to the violence. But none of those calls are reflected in the 11 pages of those White House records for January 6th given to the House Select Committee.
What?
There is a massive 7-hour and 37-minute gap in calls from 11:17 a.m. to 6:54 p.m., which includes the most violent period of the attack. CBS News has confirmed at least 2 calls during the attack that do not appear on the phone log or the Daily Diary. One call from Trump to Utah Republican Mike Lee, and another call to Trump from House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy, who described it to Norah O'Donnell by phone as the violence was unfolding. The committee is now investigating whether the president and top aides used so-called burner or disposable phones to avoid scrutiny of their calls during that time. The logs do show several incoming and outgoing calls on the morning of January 6th, including from Rudy Giuliani and former President Trump's chief strategist, Steve Bannon. At 8:37 a.m., Trump spoke with Bannon, who sources say told him to call Vice President Mike Pence and urge him to block certification of the election. Trump later did phone Pence, failing to persuade him. But that call is not listed in the records. There is a listing at 11:17 a.m. The president talked on a phone call to an unidentified person. CBS News has learned the Pence call was in that time frame. There's also a lengthy gap in records of the former president's movements during the attack, as recorded in his daily diary. At 1:21 p.m., the records note the president met with his valet. That notation signifies the president's return to the Oval Office from the rally. The next entry isn't until 4:03. The president went to the Rose Garden, it reads, where he participated in a video message to supporters.
Why is Donald Trump so good at crime? I mean, that is the only thing that man is very, very good at, is committing crime and covering up crime. It is his wheelhouse. It's what he's good at. That is why the documents that were finally turned over to the House Select Committee to get to the bottom of what went on the 6th of January, when our government was bloodied and beaten and was attacked by Trump supporters, right? It's amazing. So now they're saying, well, maybe he used burner phones, or maybe he used Dan Scavino's phone, or maybe he used, somebody else's phone. Maybe he used, I don't know who's, Mark Meadows, not Mark Meadows, Kevin McCarthy. Those two, for me, they're the same person. You understand? They're interchangeable white guys. They are just the same person. But, maybe he was using, throwaway phones, disposable phones that, prepaid phones. It's very sick and it's very sad. But here we are with a 11-page White House document that recounts and notes all the calls that were made from the White House on January 6th with a 7-hour and 37-minute gap in the information. Can you believe this? The only thing this man is good at is being an autocrat. The only thing he's good at is crime. The only thing he's good at is cover-ups. That's it. So we have no official White House notation of any calls that were made on January 6th from the White House between 11:17 in the morning and almost 7 o'clock, 6:54 at night. And we know that he made phone calls. We know that Mark Meadows received a phone call. We know that other people in the Senate. We know Mike Lee got a phone call, but that was a phone call in error. They were really trying to reach Tommy Tuberville. And so we know that these documents are either doctored, or these documents were somehow fixed or rigged, or that they're real and the president used someone else's phone, or the president used disposable burner phones. Now, Trump said, I never even heard of a burner phone. I don't even know what that is, which means he knows what that is. That's the kind of lying that you expect from Vladimir Putin, that you get from a Donald Trump, who thinks that Vladimir Putin is a freaking genius and that all negotiations should happen at gunpoint. That's what he said over the weekend. But a judge in California actually had to look at the case of John Eastman. Now, why California? Because John Eastman, who was the lawyer who came up with the bloodless coup idea, whereby all you needed was Mike Pence to refuse to certify the election, say that he had questions about the electors sent by these 6 swing states, and that if Mike Pence said he had so many questions about the legitimacy of the slate of electors from these 6 swing states, then the House of Representatives would say the election is in dispute, and the House of Representatives would take over, and by delegation, they would vote 1 vote per delegation per state, 1 vote per delegation per state, and they would, because there were enough Republican delegations, they would choose the president in the House of Representatives. This was Eastman's crazy idea. Now, what a judge found in California, and the reason why it's in California is because Eastman is now a professor at Chapman University, and that's in California, so that was the jurisdiction. The judge there who was assigned to this case, he's a district court judge named David Carter, and he made a determination in a ruling yesterday where he ordered 101 sensitive emails from John Eastman to be turned over to the January 6th committee, because they're all fighting that Dan Scavino, he doesn't want his documents turned over. Maybe it was his phone. This is what made me think maybe it's Dan Scavino's phone. Eastman doesn't want to turn over his documents, right? Because Eastman knew what he was suggesting was illegal. And actually, in these documents that were reviewed by this court, it clearly shows that John Eastman knew that the idea that he had was corrupt. He knew it was illegal to do this, okay? And so we got this remarkable ruling yesterday from this judge in California that said that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, and John Eastman, he said, based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not. That is what you would consider a preponderance of the evidence. That is not without a reasonable doubt, but that is a preponderance of the evidence, which is what he had to consider here, because this wasn't a criminal case. So he said, based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not that President Trump corruptly attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021. And that is remarkable that he determines that a president of the United States, while in office, appeared to commit a crime. And so he said, this doesn't play a direct role in whether or not to charge Donald Trump criminally, but it does mean that Eastman has to turn over these documents that clearly show a corrupt intent to obstruct a proceeding of Congress, which, we've gone over the punishment for various things, and the punishment for obstruction of a legitimate process of Congress is really severe. It's like, it's like a year in jail and $100,000 fine. But anyway, the court said that our nation was founded on a peaceful transition of power. And he said, ignoring this history, President Trump vigorously campaigned for the vice president to single-handedly determine the results of the 2020 election. This plan, this bold plan, was a subversion of the fundamental principle of democracy.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
A federal judge in California ruling just yesterday that former President Trump, quote, likely committed, end quote, multiple crimes in his efforts to stop Congress from certifying President Biden's 2020 election victory. What more can you tell us about that?
Tony, it's a very serious statement. Judge David Carter ruled that he found it, quote, more likely than not, unquote, that Trump and his legal advisor, John Eastman, engaged in criminal conduct as they pushed Pence in Congress to hold off on certification. Carter wrote, quote, if Dr. Eastman and President Trump's plan had worked, it would have permanently ended the peaceful transition of power, undermining American democracy and the Constitution. He added, if the country does not commit to pursuing accountability for those responsible, the court fears January 6th will repeat itself. Jeez. In a statement, Eastman's attorney said his client has an unblemished record as an attorney and disagrees with the judge's findings.
Yeah, he disagrees, but the judge ordered that he turn over these documents. He said of the 110 or 111 documents that Eastman doesn't want to turn over, only 10 of them should remain shielded by attorney-client privilege. The rest are all in the commission of a criminal conspiracy. I mean, come on. This is bizarre that all this, I mean, it's been 2 years already, 2 years, and nobody has turned over shreds of anything. Nobody has gone to jail. Nobody is on trial. I will say this, okay? I told you that it's a very long process for Congress because Congress doesn't have the authority to put anybody in jail the way Congress sees the Constitution, the way I see the Constitution. Congress does have the power of inherent contempt and should actually revive it, because if there's any doubt in your mind that if the shoe was on the other foot and Donald Trump was president and he wanted to lock somebody up, that they would, and that person didn't want to show up for a deposition, or that person didn't want to turn over documents, or that person didn't want to testify, or whatever it was, that they would then, the Republican Congress would hold whoever that person is in inherent contempt, and they'd be locked up in the basement of the House of Representatives. So, you know, I'm not really clear why Congress is doing it this way, but this is the way that they have done it. So what happens here is, what happened last night is the select committee decides, there's 9 of them, 2 Republicans, 7 Democrats. They decide whether or not they're going to hold somebody in contempt of Congress because that person refused to comply with a legitimate congressionally issued subpoena that has the full force of the law, and that is federal courts have decided that you must comply with a subpoena when you receive one or be held in contempt of court, right? Same thing with Congress, be held in contempt of Congress. So the way that it goes in Congress is they decide in the committee if they want to vote out, a contempt citation. The committee decided last night, they voted 9-0 to hold Peter Navarro, to hold Dan Scavino in contempt of Congress because they just refused to show up. They just refused to answer any questions. They refused to turn over any documents. And they've made it very easy to discern whether or not contempt was committed because they just didn't show up. But now it goes to the full House for a vote. Right. And that's not even scheduled yet. So we have to wait for the House to schedule a full House vote on holding Dan Scavino or holding Peter Navarro in contempt of Congress. And then after that, when the House votes to go ahead and hold them in contempt for not showing up and not producing one shred of documents, even though courts all over this country have said, like, for instance, with the legal advisor John Eastman, that they were committing a crime. There was a conspiracy to commit a crime to overthrow the peaceful transition of power in the United States, to obstruct a congressional activity. And then, if the House should vote in the affirmative there to hold Navarro and Scavino in contempt, okay, then it goes to the Department of Justice. Then it goes to Merrick Garland. And Merrick Garland then has to convene a grand jury. And then the grand jury is presented the evidence again that Congress has already established exists, and that is they didn't show up. They didn't turn over any documents. And then the grand jury will vote out an indictment. And then once the indictment is issued by the grand jury, then the Department of Justice schedules a court date. Swear to God. Or inherent contempt. You choose. So the only person that has gone through this entire process, just to refresh your memory, is Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon, who still picks up a microphone every day and you know, is on, you know, I don't even want to say the name of the platform, okay, but he's on a platform and people watch this swill and they watch him and Peter Navarro hash out, you know, whatever it is their next move is going to be in public. I mean, like in front of everybody. It's so Putin, you know, like Putin is at peace talks while he's blowing up buildings in Mykolaiv, okay? Literally killed 12 people today. So this is what goes on in this country. Here's Peter Navarro explaining to Steve Bannon on Steve Bannon's show that it really, you know, it was a coup d'etat, right?
Let's be blunt. We're trying to have regime change.
We're trying.
In fact, that's kind of reason we said this morning, and he said about not walking it back because that's what he really meant.
Don't use the we there, Steve. Don't use the we there. Be careful there. It's like it's like that government. That regime, there was regime change on November 3rd. That was a regime change. That was a coup d'etat, a stolen election. And now we have one regime in Washington, D.C., trying to take out another regime in Moscow. You and I have not only have no part about it, we were at the vanguard of trying to stop that regime change here in Washington, D.C., and all we get is
Peter, we got to bounce. We'll be back in a moment.
Going after us.
Dude, they're sitting there in public, and the way that they're talking, you think they're talking about Moscow. They're not. They're talking about the United States of America. They're talking about regime change here. They were talking about our free and fair election on November 3rd being for them an illegal regime change. And then Peter Navarro, who's definitely high, goes on some tangent about Moscow, but they're talking about the United States of America. And their position is that they try to stop regime change in the United States of America. It sounds like they're talking about Russia because that is how people in Russia talk. That is what autocrats say to each other. And he's okay. So anyway, Bannon has been found. There's been an indictment for Bannon, and his trial is set, but not until July. And that process on Bannon started a year ago. A year ago.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
All right, so there was a very important hearing last night. That was a hearing designed to start the process to hold Peter Navarro and Dan Scavino in contempt of Congress, okay? I'm going to play you a little clip of one of the 9 members. This is Representative Stephanie Murphy. She is from Florida.
Mr. Navarro made multiple media appearances during which he discussed his various roles in the events that culminated in the January 6th attack. I'd like to play a video media clip right now. Can you please cue the clip?
What about this interview, which is kind of interesting, is like I have so much knowledge to share with you about what I was involved in and what I know.
Given that you've told me that you have a plan that you push to delay or deal with the certification, you've told me 100 members back it, and you've said in public Trump was on board. If you say all those things out here, why risk a legal battle or going to jail to refuse to discuss them with the committee under oath?
Because I have a loyalty to the Constitution and a loyalty to the president. The president has invoked executive privilege in this matter. It's not my authority to revoke that privilege.
You say it's not your privilege to waive, but let's look
That's the law. No,
at how often you've waived it. Let's look at some of the news you've made on these topics. Take a look.
Former Trump advisor Peter Navarro is spilling the beans.
We had over 100 congressmen and senators on Capitol Hill ready to implement the sweep.
Peter Navarro.
Right? The boss tells Pence to take my friggin' call.
Navarro tells Rolling Stone.
It was about sending the votes back. Most or all of those states would decertify the election.
How do you expect people to take seriously your claim that this is secret and privileged when you've been out there talking about it? And when you and Bannon said the committee's dog wouldn't bark, they were afraid of you and the report, it seems now, Peter, like the dog has barked.
Thank you. He has so much knowledge to share with a journalist, but he refuses to share that knowledge in response to a lawful subpoena. Evidently, Mr. Navarro is only concerned with executive privilege, with keeping certain matters confidential when it's convenient for him.
Okay, and there is no executive privilege, as we all know. So Peter Navarro is telling everyone everything, but won't show Congress anything. Why is that? He keeps claiming there's some executive privilege. Well, the court has weighed in on this, and the court said that the executive privilege belongs to the executive, and we only have one at a time. It's America. And the one that we have is Joe Biden. And Joe Biden isn't invoking executive privilege, period. And that is the name of the game. And in fact, last night during this hearing that nobody aired, Jamie Raskin actually let the cat out of the bag that not only is Biden not invoking executive privilege, but there's been zero assertion of executive privilege on behalf of Scavino or Peter Navarro by Donald Trump. Isn't that special? Donald Trump hasn't even claimed executive privilege, even though it doesn't belong to him at all anymore to invoke or assert. But he hasn't. This was unbelievable. Jamie Raskin is, like super, super constitutionally schooled, and he knows exactly what the law is, and made a case last night that actually ends with the fact that Donald Trump didn't exert executive privilege on behalf of any of these cretins. That's why Steve Bannon is going to trial in June. Now, he's the only one who is set for trial. He's the only one that Merrick Garland had convened a grand jury to hear the case after Congress voted to hold him in contempt. That's how long that process freaking takes, okay?
The assault on American democracy that exploded on January the 6th, Mr. Chairman, had two coordinated elements that we've been able to see. One was a violent insurrection from the outside, infused by propaganda and disinformation, and led by domestic violent extremist groups like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, the Three Percenters, the QAnon networks, the militia groups. But the other component was a secret campaign on the inside to replace our constitutional process governing presidential elections with a tissue of lies and counterfeit processes that make a mockery of American democracy. This is what the political scientists call a self-coup. It's not a coup against a president, like most coups, but it's a coup organized by the president against the constitutional framework itself.
I mean, it's just, it's stunning. Okay. It's stunning. So that's where we are, just as we figured out on our own without the genius of a Jamie Raskin, without the genius of a select committee, that there were two coups going on at the same time. One was the bloodless coup that was organized by John Eastman to have Mike Pence dispute the electors and throw it to Congress so Congress would pick our president, much like the Supreme Court picked our president once before. I mean, it's crazy, but it has happened. And the other one was, pull the trigger at the end and, let the people literally beat the crap out of or maim, mangle, and mutilate the members of Congress that they could get to. Hang Mike Pence or, oh, Nancy. Do you know what I'm saying? And do it that way. But here's Peter Navarro's role in it.
We subpoenaed Navarro to produce documents by February the 23rd, 2022, and to appear for deposition on March 2nd. He has produced no documents and failed to appear for his scheduled deposition. Peter Navarro must be held in criminal contempt of Congress and the American people because he is acting with criminal contempt for the Congress and the American people. The American people want to know what sets him above the law.
So I have to tell you, as we were talking to you, a couple things happened. Bob Costa, who has been with Bob Woodward reporting the gap in the phone logs, the 7-hour, almost 8-hour gap in phone logs, has said that John Bolton, who was our national security advisor at the time, said that when Trump told the press that he doesn't know what burner phones are, he was lying, that John Bolton himself had heard the President of the United States speak about how people use burner phones to avoid having their calls scrutinized.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
All right, so the two things that happened while we were talking today, or I was talking, because we're going to go through the whole day without one freaking phone call. Maybe we should talk about Will Smith some more. Phones were lit up like a Christmas tree yesterday when we were talking about Will Smith and Chris Rock. Yeah, okay. Anyway, John Bolton said that Donald Trump is lying. He knows what a burner phone is, okay? And that he actually knows that burner phones are the way that you avoid scrutiny of your phone calls. Okay, so Donald Trump was lying about not knowing what a burner phone is. But the other thing that happened is really sick and twisted. It's because every single time there is some sort of a contempt hearing or a ruling from a court that clearly tells us as Americans that a judge who heard both sides of a case concludes that Donald Trump committed crimes, Donald Trump has to deflect with Hunter Biden or something to that effect. So today, Donald Trump said that Vladimir Putin should release the dirt on Hunter Biden. Vladimir Putin should release the 30,000 emails on Hillary Clinton. Now he says Vladimir Putin ought to release the dirt on Hunter. You know, this is really sick and twisted, but let me tell you something. This is how democracies die. When you have a criminal who either occupies the Oval Office or is a criminal who's not been held accountable after occupying the Oval Office. And I mean not accountable at all for any of his crimes, okay? Nothing that he did. 187-minute delay in sending out the National Guard on January 6th. Now we have almost 8 hours, 7 hours and 37 minutes of a gap in official White House phone records, a denial that he knows what a burner phone is. And then, of course, we find out from the National Security Advisor past that, of course, he knows what a burner phone is. Okay. Then we have 10 times that he was cited for obstruction of justice in the original Mueller report having to do with interference by the Russians in the 2016 election. He's impeached twice, once for withholding defense equipment from the country we are watching Vladimir Putin bomb into ashes, Ukraine. Okay. He was impeached the second time for January 6th and his dereliction of duty there and his coup plotting there. And yet the man doesn't get held responsible or accountable in our courts of law. He just doesn't. That is how democracies die. I just want you to know that. So last night, the select committee was, trying to show everybody how Peter Navarro, who wrote a 36-page report, in case you forgot what Peter Navarro did, he wrote a 36-page report saying he had evidence that the election was stolen, that votes were being flipped, that machines were being tampered with, all this stuff, all this crap, okay, that was untrue, all in an effort to obstruct the free will of the American people in an election. And still, I just played you yesterday, was on Steve Bannon's show saying we tried to stop regime change. We tried to stop the coup. Literally taking the truth and spinning it 180 degrees. Like up is down and black is white, just like a dictator does. This is Vladimir Putin saying he's denazifying Ukraine and acting like a Nazi in Ukraine. Literally marching people to camps. Vladimir Putin is marching people to camps in Russia, out of Ukraine and into Russia to be held in camps. Saying he's not the Nazi, that Zelensky is the Nazi, and Zelensky not only is not a Nazi, he was elected by the people, but he's also Jewish, and his father had lost 3 of his brothers in the Holocaust. Just saying. So here they are making their case last night, and it was nowhere on the TV.
The Supreme Court said in 1950 in U.S. versus Bryan that a subpoena creates a public duty which every person within the jurisdiction of the government is bound to perform when properly summoned. In 2020, the Supreme Court emphasized that it is the duty of all citizens to cooperate with a subpoena. But Navarro invokes the words executive privilege, repeats the phrase over and over again, it is not my privilege to waive. And he thinks he has found a magic wand to nullify the powers of the U.S. Congress, just like he thinks he has found a magic wand to nullify the powers of the states to cast their own electoral college votes. Now, Navarro's statement that the executive privilege is, quote, not his to waive, is in fact accurate. But if the executive privilege is not Navarro's to waive, then neither, for the exact same reason, and by definition, is it his to assert in the first place. The Supreme Court has been clear that the executive privilege belongs to the President of the United States. And on February 28, 2022, the White House counsel notified Mr. Navarro that President Biden determined that assertion of executive privilege is not justified with respect to Navarro's effort to cover up the evidence of his participation in this assault on American constitutional democracy. So Navarro then appears to fall back on the vague assertion that the executive privilege here belongs to former President Trump, which is not only dubious, but entirely irrelevant, because our committee has not been given any attempted invocation of executive privilege by Donald Trump.
Hello? So this is all obstruction of Congress all over again. These people don't have any regard for America, American government, American institutions, the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate. They don't even care about the courts, okay? They don't care about the judicial branch. They don't care. They think that it doesn't apply to them because they're autocrats. They're above it all. They're the elites, okay? They are the swamp. They are the swamp creatures. They swim in the swamp, and no one's going to hold them accountable for their swampy criminal behavior. And that might be true. And if that is true, if this is where we find ourselves, that's the end of democracy. And just like Putin will always come back for the second bite, meaning the war in Chechnya was a two-instance war. The first one was in 99, and then the second one was when Vlad became the president of Russia. And that's when he went back for a second bite and totally toppled Chechnya. I mean, like nothing was left alive. Everything was razed to the ground. Just like, the general said at the beginning of the show, there wasn't one brick left upon one brick when Putin was done. Georgia, okay, he keeps on making these incursions, and he's going to go back. You know, we obviously know he annexed Crimea in 2014 and the Donbass region, right? And now he's back all these years later. So that is what will happen here. Donald Trump will just be the opening salvo in our Chechnya. It will just be the opening salvo in our attack against ourselves, right? Because that's what I'm trying to show you, is that Russia in Chechnya attacked Russia. And they won't give up. They will just keep coming at us and coming at us and coming at us until democracy is done here, until it's finished. That is why you have to hold this person, these people, the Navarros, the Bannons, the Scavinos, the Flynns, all of them. That's why they all have to be held accountable. The Mo Brooks, the Andy Biggs, the Getz, all of them, the Jim Jordans, the Tommy Tubervilles, all of them have to be held accountable for their crimes that they committed and continue to commit against our republic. And if we can't do it, and if we don't do it, then we don't have a country anymore.
The Department of Justice has a duty to act on this referral and others we have sent. Without enforcement of congressional subpoenas, there is no oversight. And without oversight, no accountability, not for the former president or any other president, past, present, or future.
Yep.
Without enforcement of its lawful process, Congress ceases to be a co-equal branch of government, and the balance of power would be forever altered to the lasting detriment of the American people.
That is how democracy dies. And once it dies, you won't see it again in your lifetime. I know I won't see it again in mine, but your kids won't see it in theirs. This empire stuff, this autocratic stuff, it goes on, and it's only ever overthrown by civil war. Really, do we want to go there? Do we?
Mary had a little lamb. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Bidens, both of them, $3.5 million for them? That's a lot of money. She gave him $3.5 million. So now I would think Putin would know the answer to that. I think he should release it. I think we should know that answer. Now, you won't get the answer from Ukraine, but why are they giving somebody who knows nothing about energy $187,000 a month plus a $3 million upfront payment? And I won't even talk about China because they haven't gone into Taiwan yet. Right. That'll be next. But why did the mayor of Moscow's wife give the Biden family $3.5 million? Nobody wants to ask the question. And Chris Wallace, who's a total lightweight, unlike his father, who interviewed me for 60 Minutes, who was actually a good piece. Mike Wallace was great. He wants to be Mike Wallace, but he doesn't have the talent.
Oh, God.
But why is it that the mayor of Moscow's wife gave the Biden family $3.5 million? I think Putin now would be willing to probably give that answer. I'm sure he knows.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find the 30,000 emails that are missing. You'll be rewarded mightily by our media. Oh, my God. So here you have the former president of the United States of America sitting on a D-list cable station broadcast asking for a favor from a man who is engaged in a genocide, a slaughter of an entire country of people who love democracy so much that they are willing to stay and die for it. But Donald Trump is asking the genocidal maniac to do him a favor and get dirt for him on Hunter Biden again. I don't think he's well. I think he's mentally deranged. I think there's something wrong with him. The Russians are taking people to filtration camps now. They are taking photographs of everybody that they are busing into these filtration camps. I mean, leave it to Russia to come up with a bureaucratic name worthy of Orwell. for a concentration camp or a filtration camp. And there's forcible rape going on of women in front of their 4-year-old children. And Donald Trump is asking the man who's causing all of this for a favor to help him get Hunter Biden. Guess where that clip ended up? Guess, everybody. Just guess. Come on. You can do it. You can do it. Yeah, on Russian TV. Now, I hope you're watching because there's no translator that's audible, but there are subtitles in English for this very short clip of Russia One, the propaganda state-run TV station that is now saying to its people and saying to Vlad, you have to help our friend Donald Trump. Do it. Help our friend Donald Trump.
Нам, нашему народу, пришло время призвать народ Соединенных Штатов сменить режим.
Regime translates. Yes, you heard the word regime. He says, now is the time to help our friends in the United States to change the regime in the U.S. early, meaning don't wait for 2024. Okay, there's a little more.
В США досрочно и снова помочь нашему.
And to again help our partner Trump. And to again help our partner Trump. Seriously.
Партнеру Трампу стать президентом.
To become president. Would you like to see it all the way through? Here you go.
Нам, нашему народу, пришло время призвать народ Соединенных Штатов сменить режим в США досрочно и снова помочь нашему партнеру Трампу стать президентом.
Partnero Trumpo. Some translate, some of the words are pretty self-evident, right? Partnero Trumpo, regime. It translates pretty well. So that is what happens on Russian TV when you have lunatic ex-presidents getting on TV here on D-list channels. They just turn the video around and play it to the Russian people as they lie to the Russian people about the fact that they aren't at war in Ukraine. Now, I told you I've been to Russia, and the last time I was in Russia, there was war in Ukraine. They were, taking over Crimea. And frankly, no one in Russia knew about that either. And I remember it being really freaky creepy because you think we're all living in the 21st century. You think we all have the internet. You think we all have, some sort of TV news. And we all realize that there's always going to be propaganda here in the United States, channels and trolls and all kinds of, interlopers, trying to spread falsehoods and trying to lie and trying to color what their orientation tells them, they believe. And, not doing math if it's, I experienced this with gun violence, okay? When people who were numerically, not challenged, when people who could do numbers, they knew their numbers, and they were able to do their numbers, would find out that the more guns America had, the higher the homicide rate was in America, and not even including, the suicides or the domestic violence or, no, just the homicides, right? Just the violence, the gun violence. And they would sit there and they would paw over these numbers, leave out certain numbers that didn't help them with their cognitive dissonance. Like if they did the complete math problem, they would come to the same conclusion that the numbers are concluding, and that is more guns equal more gun crime. But they couldn't make themselves do it because their whole world would shatter. And so even people who were numerically gifted or able would skip over the part that would disorient them. So that goes on. You do. That is part of what cognitive dissonance is. It's sort of like you believe something so hard that any evidence of the contrary would shatter your world. So you ignore it, or you walk away from it, or you try and twist it or change it, or you omit things. Well, here's the thing. We have a former president of the United States of America who is literally a mob boss, a thug, okay, who is asking for a favor from a man who is literally committing genocide. Now, if this was 1939 or 40 or 41, 2, 3, 4 or 45, and you had a former president, okay, sitting on a TV station saying Hitler knows, Hitler's got dirt on FDR. Hitler knows. Hitler's got dirt on FDR. And Hitler really needs to, cooperate. Hitler really needs to, I need a favor from Hitler. What would America say? What would be the reaction of Americans either before 1941, meaning we didn't have soldiers deployed there, or after 1941 when we did? I think people would be sickened by that. I think people would be outraged by that. I think people would want to tar and feather a person who did that. And it's only because we have so much cognitive dissonance in our country. It's almost to a level of Russian propaganda where the Russians don't even believe they are at war, even though there are Ukrainians that are infiltration camps in their own country that they can actually see. And they're telling these prisoners that the Russians didn't do that.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
A fact check. The payments the former president is referring to come from a highly criticized Republican-led Senate report released just weeks before the 2020 election. It maintained that Elena Baturina, the widow of Moscow's former mayor, wired $3.5 million to a firm that was associated with Hunter Biden. The report did not show that Hunter Biden received any of that money. In addition, Hunter Biden's legal team has long claimed that he had no interest in the firm and was not paid any of the money in question. As to Trump's claims that Putin knows something about the payments, the Russian president has previously said he was unaware of any business ties between Hunter Biden and Baturina. One thing Trump failed to mention, according to reports, Trump himself was seeking out business with the former mayor of Moscow back in the late 1990s. He had pageants, he had a pageant there, was very involved with Russia.
And his son said, we don't need loans from banks. We get all the money we need from Russia. So, look, the man lies. He is a liar. Putin is a liar. They're both liars. And the idea that they lie to their people in order to empower themselves is a very sick and twisted fact. And the damage that Putin is doing to Russia and Russians right now is something that we dodged ever so slightly, even though how many people died of COVID? How many? Because it was a hoax, So I just want you to understand that the kind of rot that is happening to our country and the kind of rot that is happening to Russian society, to middle class Russians, it's the same kind of rot. It's what happens when you have leaders that stand on a stage and say, I alone can fix it, and then start empowering the very elite to get everything from everybody who works. It's just, it's so amazing how Americans are falling for the same rot that's eating alive a country that has great people in it. Russians, I know a lot of Russians. I'm from New York, for God's sake, and I'm Ukrainian. Okay, there are a lot of Russians in my life, a lot of them, and they are wonderful people. They're funny. They're great cooks. They love their children. They love culture. They love languages. Okay, they can't dance. Neither can I. It's a flaw. It is. But I mean, it's just people. They're just so badly led by an autocratic dictator. They're just so badly led. And they've resigned themselves to the fact that their vote doesn't matter, that there aren't free and fair elections, that there's nothing they can do about it. And so they just go on with their daily lives as best they can until there's no more sugar. There's no more toilet paper. There's no more, paper towels. There's no more bread. There's no more wheat. There's no nothing there. I mean, we watched this happen here. We watched, the complete contamination of food programs. It's interesting. I almost played it yesterday. But Ivanka tweeted that the poor Ukrainian people, they need food. And so I'm sending millions of meals to them. And God bless the drivers who are driving these meals to these poor people who need the meals. I mean, it was really sick and twisted because I remembered when they did the food box program in the Trump administration and millions and millions and millions of dollars, listen, like tens of millions of dollars went to people who they got contracts who had absolutely no experience in any food arena. I mean, they had no experience with any of it. Nothing. And so you saw milk spoil, you saw meat spoil, you saw things not kept at temperatures that would, they would perish on the way, and they still got paid. I mean, it was such fraud. It was an amazing fraud. People just were, beside themselves with COVID and beside themselves with, what do we do and how do we work and we're at home and we're isolated. That a lot of this corruption went under the radar, but it all happened. It all happened because in chaos you can steal. And I kept on trying to show it to you, but I don't know how many people remember the food box program, and that the really insulting portion of it was not just that tens of millions of dollars were wasted and milk spoiled and contracts went to people who had never delivered a bottle of milk in their lives, right? And meat and poultry and all of this stuff just spoiled, and people were needing that food. They wanted that food. They had to have that food. But that he also made a letter from him. And God knows how much did it cost to print this letter and distribute this letter into every box of spoiled food that he had delivered or that he tried to have delivered. But that man put a letter in every box of food like, you better thank me, I'm Donald Trump, and this food is from me. Using the food as a political way to score political points. I mean, it's a sick, and people mock it. They go, so what do you do? Well, that's the Hatch Act, right? Oh, the Hatch Act. Oh, nobody's been prosecuted under that. Yeah, but you see, this is the incremental decline. This is what happens when you have a scam artist, a fraud, a demagogue, a liar, a cheat, a thug, a mob boss as the president of the United States. And when you see it, even in its infancy, when you saw Donald Trump stand on a stage and say, Russia, if you're listening, you should have known then. You should have known then that this guy had no boundaries, had no ethics, had no morals, had nothing to offer you except hatred and racism and lies and, in the end, violence. So now you see him appealing to a guy who is engaged right at this moment in genocide, a guy who is literally striking civilians and not as collateral damage, not by accident, not because he's using dumb bombs. No, on purpose. This, they say, oh, well, these are unintended consequences of war. No, these are the intended consequences of this war. The intent is to bomb civilians. The intent is to hurt children. The intent is to starve people. It is to surround their city and starve them to death. I'm hearing stories of, sisters who were stuck in, Mariupol, where there was no water, this is where they are forcibly deporting people from Mariupol. They're going through Mariupol, and anybody that's still alive there, the Russians are, they're telling them, separate the women and children. I mean, this is really Nazi stuff, just so you know. Separate the women and children and from the men. We even want the disabled men, okay? We want everybody separated. And then we're going to take the women and we're going to drive them 600 miles into Russia, put them in these filtration camps and filter them for their political ideology, photograph them, fingerprint them, and take their passports from them. And this is his buddy.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
This is pretty extraordinary. In an interview with the right-wing website out just yesterday, Mr. Trump calls on Vladimir Putin to release this information about Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine. Now, this echoes then President Trump's call for Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, to investigate the Bidens. That, of course, led to his first impeachment. Only now he's asking Putin to do it while Putin is at war in Ukraine. Now, the Department of Justice is investigating Hunter Biden, but so far he has maintained there's been absolutely no wrongdoing in his business dealings.
And you know what? If the Justice Department finds wrongdoing on Hunter Biden's part, then Hunter Biden ought to stand at the bar of justice and take his punishment. But so far, nothing. The only thing, he makes these numbers up out of whole cloth. The $3.5 million from the mayor, the former mayor of Moscow. Donald Trump had a freaking Miss Universe pageant in Moscow. Is there any self-awareness on his part at all? No, there isn't. And, what about Paul Manafort and his little adventure in Ukraine? Did that just escape the Trump, mind? He pardoned Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort was convicted on fraud. He was convicted on fraud and money laundering for laundering money he made in Ukraine by having clients who were tried in Ukraine and found guilty of treason in Ukraine. That was Paul Manafort's a client. Viktor Yanukovych, it's just an amazing story. Here you have Paul Manafort representing Viktor Yanukovych, who was a puppet of Moscow's. He was Putin. In fact, Putin campaigned with Viktor Yanukovych. Putin literally was on the campaign trail vouching for Viktor Yanukovych. Do you know where Paul Manafort's office was? See, now it'll make sense to you. Back then, when we were talking about it, it didn't make any sense to anybody except, people who were, Ukrainian. That his office was in Donetsk. Paul Manafort's office was in the Donbass region. That's where he was in a luxury office building. And he was hired by a guy who was loyal to Putin to help him clean up his image as being a Putin puppet in order to run for re-election. And Manafort, his lobby shop, Manafort's lobby shop, made $60 million doing this work. $60 million. He didn't want to pay taxes on $60 million. So he laundered it and lied about it. And he was convicted, and then Donald Trump pardoned him. The other day, Paul Manafort was trying to get on a plane to Dubai. And they kicked him off the plane because he was flying with a fake passport. And then yesterday, he was on ABC in New York. It's the conservative talk radio station. It hosts Sean Hannity. And when Fat Boy was alive, they hosted his show too. So Paul Manafort went on, WABC in New York. He gave an interview to ABC in New York saying, I never tried to hide any of the money I was making in Ukraine. You were convicted for trying to hide your money in Ukraine that you made from your client who was tried for treason, found guilty and convicted. Why was he tried for treason? His client, he actually tidied him up so much that in 2010, Paul Manafort was able to get Viktor Yanukovych reelected. And convinced the Ukrainian people that Viktor Yanukovych wasn't a Russian puppet, he wasn't loyal to Vlad, that he would help Ukraine move into the EU, that he would help them, reposition themselves away from Russia and more to the West. Except that when there was an agreement between the EU to trade with Ukraine, Putin said, oh, hell no, and Yanukovych refused to sign it. And that's when you had the Maidan Revolution. That's when you had everybody go to the streets. And what they found out was that Viktor Yanukovych was living in the lap of luxury. He had a freaking mansion with a zoo. And there was a black ledger there. And Manafort's name was in the black ledger as receiving payments from Viktor Yanukovych. And that's how we know anything about it. So you thought Manafort was the worst thing that happened to Ukraine. No. Well, anyway, Viktor Yanukovych ended up not only locking up the woman that ran against him, Yulia Tymoshenko, who ran, you remember her, I know you do. She was blonde and she wore braids and she braided them, like over her head like a crown of braids. He locked her up after he became president for the crime of running against him. Seriously. That's how dirty this man is. That's how evil he is. That's how Trumpian and Putin-esque that man was. Okay? So he locked up Yulia in jail, in prison. Lock her up, lock her up. The mentor learned from the mentee. And then after the Maidan happened, people went to the streets because they wanted to sign that EU agreement. They wanted to trade with the European Union instead of 70% of their trade being dependent on Putin, which is what they were facing. Yanukovych called the police out and had 100 protesters shot and killed. That's why he was put on trial. And where did he go? Where did Viktor Yanushchenko go? He went to Russia, which is where he is now. And Manafort is sitting on radio shows saying, yeah, I made $60 million in Ukraine. I'm not trying to hide it. But Hunter Biden.
Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with this, but the prosecutors in your case allege that between 2010 and 2014, you made $60 million from working in Ukraine. Is that about right?
I mean, honestly, I don't know how much it was. I mean, but the numbers they were using, I managed a whole bunch of things, including the lobbyists who were filed and were doing the lobbying, not me, in Washington. And so they took the lump sum money as if it was all coming into my pocket. And I was running a major enterprise of lobbyists in Europe to become part of Ukraine, lobbyists in Washington to help them understand what was going on and what Ukraine was trying to do to become part of the European Union, as well as political consulting, because a number of things as well. So that number, and I don't know if 60 is correct over those 4 years or not, but that was not all my money.
Got it.
I did well and openly did well. I didn't hide it.
Yeah, you did, and that's why you were convicted. You were convicted of money laundering. I mean, the liars never stop lying. They just never do. They don't know how. And he's, no, I did some political consult. Yes, for Viktor Yanushchenko, and your client ended up being tried for treason and found guilty of treason in Ukraine. Oh, no, I ran a giant enterprise. Yes, out of a luxury office building in the Donbass region, which is totally aligned with Putin. Oh, my God, these people, they never stop. And he, this interviewer from WABC didn't even, and I listened to the whole damn thing. Yeah, I did, so you didn't have to. But, oh, my God. Didn't even ask him, why were you thrown off a plane the other day? Where were you going? Oh, I was going to Dubai. Why were you going to Dubai? To run away from what I caused in Ukraine? Try and make more business deals? Maybe sell some oil and gas back to Ukraine now? I don't know. But you didn't make it to Dubai. What happened there? Oh, well, my passport. What about it? It was fake. Oh! This is a political consultant. This is the campaign manager for the Trump campaign 2016. The man who changed the platform of the Republican National Committee to not give weapons to Ukraine.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Donald Trump is mentally unwell in a way that makes him interested exclusively in what benefits him. Distinctions between true, false, right, wrong, America's friends, America's enemies are irrelevant to Donald Trump. Russia has helped him financially and politically over the years, and he has aligned himself with Vladimir Putin. This is significant not just because he was president, but he's the leader of one of America's two political parties, he might be president again.
Oh, God.
And this is a moment of moral clarity when Vladimir Putin is slaughtering thousands of people in Ukraine for Republicans who do care about the difference between right, wrong, true, false, America's friends and America's enemies, to reflect on whether this is the person they want to attach their party to.
Or the ideology that they are about. Are they with Putin on the slaughter? Are they asking favors of Putin as he slaughters and commits genocide and sets up camps for women and children to be forcibly deported to out of Ukraine into Russia, to be fingerprinted, deprived of their passports, and photographed, and then asked about their political ideology, whether or not they support Vladimir Putin over their country and their country's quest for independence. I mean, this is really sad and sick. This is a man who obviously is hell-bent on destroying, I mean, down to the ash, down to the ground, places that he covets. He did it in Aleppo, Syria. He did it in Grozny, Chechnya. He's doing it now in at least Mariupol and some other cities like Kharkiv and another city called Kherson down there in the southeast portion of Ukraine. I don't know where is the Republican Party saying, oh my God, this is a bridge too far. This is like, asking Hitler for a favor in the middle of, his invasion of Austria, or in the middle of his invasion of Czechoslovakia. This is the same thing. Where are they? Why aren't they speaking up and speaking out? Where are his children saying this is a bridge too far for us? Huh? Where are they? Where's Jim Jordan? Where is Fox News? Where? Let me tell you something. They are not calling him out on any of this. The Fox News people, they're saying, well, Hunter Biden. What about you know what? If Hunter Biden did something that was illegal, if Hunter Biden did something like Paul Manafort did, if Hunter Biden enriched himself, and it cost people their lives in Ukraine, if Hunter Biden, laundered money, if Hunter Biden committed fraud in Ukraine against Ukrainians, let him meet the bar of justice. I don't know anybody that from my viewpoint that would say, oh, he should get away with it. There's just no proof that Hunter Biden did any of those things. There's no evidence to support a claim that Hunter Biden money laundered, or Hunter Biden did anything untoward, or Hunter Biden did anything, illegal. There just isn't. Manafort, on the other hand, has been tried and convicted, pardoned by Donald Trump, and just recently as last week, tried to flee the country on a bad passport and got caught and kicked off a plane here in Miami on his way to Dubai. And then decided to go and, repair his image somehow by being interviewed on a New York conservative radio station where he lied. I mean, I don't understand how these people are okay with the Republican elite or the Republican Party, unless they are as corrupt and they are as jaded and they are as eager to steal and loot and plunder America the way that Putin and his henchmen stole and plundered from the Russians. Maybe they think that this is, this is their future. Maybe they think oligarchy is their future. Listen, we have so much rot in our own country already, and it's been building, but it really is getting exponentially worse when you have a leader who lies and says, or calls out little green men. You know what little green men was a reference to when we were showing you little green men in Lafayette Square. Remember that? Lafayette Square was a peaceful protest. And Donald Trump and Bill Barr called out the little green men, meaning guys in uniforms without any insignia on them. So you didn't know who they were. That's exactly what Putin did in Crimea. And the whole time that Putin put, and it turned out to be his intelligence agents. It turned out to be an arm of the GRU. It turned out to be the military arm of, his, intelligence units. Here, it was our Department of Homeland Security. It was prison extraction teams, right? And so the reason why Yanukovych was put on trial was because protesters were shot and killed by his henchmen. And Donald Trump tried to do it in Lafayette Square Park. And when people like me called it out, oh, well, they deserved it. He wanted a photo op and they were in his way. Whatever. I mean, excusing behavior like that is what gets you exponentially further down the rot road, further down the road of corruption, further down the road of I'll take what I want because I can. And there's no rules to stop me. This is, no one is above the law. Bull crap. Obviously, this whole group is above the law. This whole cabal of miscreants is above the law. Here you have Ginny Thomas, okay, Clarence's wife. Clarence is a Supreme Court justice. You would think that alone would make him feel an obligation to do better than he's doing. To rein in any perception of conflict, to say to his wife, advocating for a coup in your text messages isn't really something that you should be doing. Can we talk about it? Can we just, have a bright red line between your other endeavors at the Heritage Foundation and these $700,000 checks that I'm not declaring to protect you? By the way, he did not. He did not disclose that his wife had made almost $1 million from the Heritage Foundation in his financial disclosure forms. Okay, he didn't. And that's a problem. But here's the other problem. There's no enforcement mechanism. You can't hold him accountable for failure to disclose financial windfalls that were made that might actually involve cases that come before him. There's no way to hold him accountable for voting no on whether or not presidential records should be turned over to the January 6th Select Committee, who are trying to get to the bottom of the violence we saw on our Capitol on January 6th by a bunch of, militiamen and white supremacists and ethnic cleansers, right? There's no enforcement mechanism. So don't tell me that nobody is above the law in this here country, and that's a problem. But instead of fixing that problem, we're making it worse by saying they can do whatever they want. Karen can do whatever she wants. It's mafia stuff. You understand that? When you realize that there is a hole in the law, when you realize there's no enforcement mechanism for behaving this way, or that the Hatch Act really doesn't have a penalty, and so Donald Trump decides he's going to use fraudulent contracts, millions of dollars in payments to unqualified hunger relief, and I put that in quotations, hunger relief contractors who had been, Congress had warned him multiple times that these people were not real people, that these people were fraudulent people, and that he should not give them contracts to distribute food because they're just lining their pockets with taxpayer dollars. He felt there was no way to hold him accountable for doing this. So not only was he going to do it, but he's going to put a letter in the box saying, this rotten food, this is from me. It's a little gift from your president. I mean, you're talking millions of dollars. He's sitting on some stupid show on the internets saying $3.5 million. That's a lot of money. You know how much money was given to a USDA reimbursed place, a place called YEG? $2.85 million in deliveries. $2.85 million in deliveries. They made a 50% profit, and worse yet, they sent sour milk. And then another one, a $1.7 million contract. For what? Spoiled meat.
Mary
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America. From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Ukraine accuses Russia this morning of playing a trick, saying Russian promises after negotiations in Istanbul to drastically reduce military activity around Kyiv and the nearby city of Chernihiv is merely a ploy for time to rearm and consolidate forces. President Zelensky saying Ukraine isn't letting its guard down. The signals we hear from the negotiations can be called positive, he says, but they do not drown out the explosions of Russian shells, adding Ukraine isn't willing to surrender any territory to Russia. Promises also can't drown out what Russia is doing to the city of Mariupol. New satellite images show how Russian strikes have leveled entire blocks. The Pentagon also expressing deep skepticism about Russia's supposed trust-building withdrawals around Kyiv.
We're not prepared to call this a retreat or even a withdrawal.
Russia invaded Ukraine over a month ago from 3 directions. From the north, down from Belarus toward Kyiv, from the east toward Kharkiv, and from the south toward Mariupol. Russia's northern front around Kyiv has been a disaster. Huge Russian losses and logistical failures, including a 40-mile-long convoy that ran out of gas. The Pentagon believes Russia could now focus on the other fronts while rebuilding forces around Kyiv.
This was a Russian position. You can see the Z that has become the mark of this war on the Russian armored vehicle. And it seems that they were destroyed just as they were camping out in this area. You can see all of their equipment, clothing, flak jackets and food just left here right at the back of this armored vehicle.
Across Ukraine now, they're not bracing for a Russian ceasefire, not taking the Russians' word, but preparing for more Russian attacks.
Jesus Christ. I mean, it's an amazing thing how Putin is sending people who apparently are not even, qualified. They're low level, like agriculture secretaries posing as, defense ministers to these talks in Istanbul as a distraction, telling, making people think that he's open to a peace negotiation, but he's not open to a peace negotiation. What he's doing is regrouping. What he's doing is protecting the artillery. What he's doing is changing out the troops, right? Now he's down to, the reservists, because the conscripts, holy crap, the stories about them. So first of all, there's no one knows exactly how many, casualties on the Russian side there are, or how many casualties on the Ukrainian side there are. But they seem to think that there's around 16,000 dead Russian soldiers that the Ukrainians have killed. And then there's like this theory of military combat. I don't know if it's, something you should subscribe to or not, but basically what military planners do is they look at the number of casualties, military casualties, and then they multiply that number by 3 so that they can come up with an idea of how many wounded. They think for every killed, there are 3 wounded. So you do the math on 16,000 times 3, and that's how many wounded. So you're talking like an enormous amount of Russian mothers who don't know when their sons are coming home, if their sons are coming home, if their sons are coming home in 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces, nobody knows, right? So there's that. But he's faking these peace talks in order to buy himself time, in order to change out the troops, because the conscripts are not doing very well at all. A lot of the bombs have been stockpiled for so long that they're duds. Then you now have evidence that not only was their food rations, their MREs from 2015, but now we're finding out that some of them were sent out to the combat zone with bandages and first aid kits, I kid you not, that were 45 years old. 45 years old bandages. Can you believe this? And so he's taking a pause. while he reconstitutes his plan. This isn't plan A, which was supposed to be, we sweep in, we take Kiev, we, circle it, and we, starve everybody out, the siege mentality, whatever. No. This is going on almost, it's more than a month now, right? And he's pausing now. And what I fear is that he will do what he does, which is gas the remaining people in the cities that he wants to take. And I'm not sure if the cities that he wants to take are limited to Mariupol. And he wants Mariupol for that infamous land bridge between Crimea, which he took in 2014 with the little green men thing, the whole time lying to the world, saying, there are no troops in Crimea. There are no troops. I don't know what you're talking about. Those are Nazis. Those are, people that want to be with Russia. They're trying to be with Russia. And then repeating that in the eastern portion of Ukraine, in Donetsk, where Paul Manafort's luxury office was, and in Luhansk, which are the two regions of this Donbass region that you hear so much about. I don't know, but I could tell you he's not going to stop if he sees any success at all. Any success at all. There was some serious shelling last night. And let me tell you something. You don't ever want to wake up and find Richard Engel reporting from your street. You don't ever want to wake up and see Clarissa Ward down your block. You don't ever want to wake... Oh, they pulled out the heavy artillery this time. Yeah, you got Halogarani. Now, the only people that know who Halogarani is are people who travel. Because Halogarani is the CNN international war correspondent. All of a sudden, Halogarani's popping up on CNN domestic. I'm like, oh my God, they're calling out the heavy artillery. And Christian Amanpour is now walking around Kiev in a flak jacket. You don't want to see that. I mean, you think seeing Ben Weiderman might be bad. Jim Cantori in case of a weather event. Yeah. But you don't want to see Halogarani. You don't want to see Christian Amanpour in person. I'm so sorry, you just don't. Not unless you're Jamie Rubin. Nobody wants to see her up close reporting from your neck of the woods. No one. But, oh, my God, it's just, it's crazy. It's crazy.
We all remember the Russians said, we won't invade, right before they launched this massive assault. And now that the initial plan for sweeping across the country has failed, the Pentagon fears the Russians may get even more desperate. A senior administration official telling me that the Russians have given up on what is called maneuver warfare in these areas and are instead reinforcing, moving their tanks and armor into positions outside these cities to protect their long-range artillery, kind of like circling the wagons. And that artillery is what has been doing so much indiscriminate damage. They fire blindly into these cities since their original plan to roll in and take those cities did not work. Now, is there hope for the talks? There always is, but many at the Pentagon fear it is just a distraction while the Russians are trying to resupply and regroup.
So here are some terms for us to learn. This is sick. This is sad. But remember I told you when, Putin was sitting there massing troops on the border that we were going to have to learn things. We were going to have to learn the Sea of Azov. We were going to have to learn things. We were going to have to learn about Donbass and Crimea and Mariupol. We were going to have to learn how to pronounce things. We were going to have to learn how to say these towns. Kherson, the K is silent. Kharkiv, it is not. Okay, I get it. It's confusing. But now you're going to have to learn this little phrase. War of attrition. Or war of exhaustion. This is a tactic where you break the will of the people by exhausting them. By killing so many of them, starving so many of them, isolating so many of them, surrounding so many of them for so long that they lose their will to survive or live or fight. War of attrition.